So I'm here today to talk about ease and joy. It was strange. I woke up this morning and thought, I better look on the Josie said when Josie website to see what I'm talking about. So I went on and had a look, and it said on it, it says on it, it says when a sailboat connects fully with the conditions of nature, all effort and struggle disappear. There is nothing left to do. And then it went on to say, life is a series of battles with ourselves, and these conflicts sap our energy. I think we all know about that. If we watch young children, we see in their joy and effortless play. Yet the moment we're caught up in our lives, goals and outcomes and daily transactions, we are again caught up in our struggles. The question it asks us is, can the mind be free of struggle and discover a sense of joy? So that's the question we have to ask ourselves, and I'll go into that a bit more as the talk goes on. But I just want to tell a story around a couple of maybe a couple of days ago, a week ago. I was driving to I left to go to work early in the morning, and we're here. I live in the Cotswolds in England. It's quite a rural area. There's a lane that takes you up, a single track lane, a bit like driving down the single lane track to Spring Green. Takes you up through the hillside, and you have to go through a woods. And as I came out the top of the woods, the ground breaks open, and you've got verges on either side. And right up in front of my car came this big wingspan. And in this part of the world, we have the biggest wingspan bird of prey is a red kite. And the sun was just up, and this big bird of prey came right up in front of my car. And I've only got a small car, so it was probably seemed bigger because I'm in this small car. And it was just, I want to use this example because it was just effortless joy. I didn't have any time. I knew what it was. There was no thought involved about what it was. I knew because I see there's a pair of these birds around that I see quite regularly when I'm driving. So, but to see him so close up and come up across the boot of the car and up across the window screen, I had this complete sense of effortless joy. It made me smile a bit because most people know who listen to me at all know that I'm a big Kung Fu Panda fan. And it was like this, it was awesomeness, as Kung Fu Panda would say. It was just like awesomeness come up across the window screen. But it got me thinking, which was a bad thing, but it got me back into thought about, okay, that just came from nowhere. The conditions have to be right, interestingly. The conditions for the kite to be there on the side of the verge, probably looking for prey. The conditions of me being open to let that effortless joy in, that has to be there too. But got me thinking about how do you expand that out? How can you expand that effortless joy into something that is limitless, boundless? How do you open it? And it's something that I want to explore a bit today whilst we're talking. Please, if this goes on too long, please tell me we're getting towards the end, somebody. Yeah. So I'm going to share a few experiences today with you of the last 12 months of chaplaincy experiences that I've had. And the reason for sharing these experiences with you is that I hope they point you in the right direction with your own training, and they may bring a little bit more of ease and joy into your life. I need to make sure I keep patient confidentiality, so I won't be using any names or places of work. So that's quite important to me. But before we do that, I would like you to give some thought. Ask yourself this question: why are you here today? What has made you turn up? Why have you turned up to listen? Now, I'm making an assumption there that you have turned up to listen. But I would be interested, there's only a small audience here, so I'd be interested to hear back from anybody why you think you're here. So, just hold those comments as we go through this, what we're going to talk. And if you want to feedback, which is great news, we're quite an intimate group, as I said. So please do put your hand up or just step in and question what I'm saying. Because as we go through, you will discover I'm going to put more and more responsibility back with you. And if you're stupid enough to believe anything I'm telling you, you're on the wrong path. Yeah. So first, I want to tell you a story. I told you I'd tell you some chaplaincy stories, and I had a very probably I'll share this about a patient. I had a meeting over Christmas with a patient that was probably the most profound meeting, one of the most profound meetings I've had in my life, probably. Not only spiritual or from a chaplaincy point of view, but just generally in life. I went into work on Christmas Eve into one of the hospitals, and I was quietly updating some records in the chapel office, and had a phone call to visit a patient in ICU, which is intensive care unit. And for those of you medical might know, but intensive care, there's lots of screens, lots of bleepings going off, lots of cables, tubes, all sorts of stuff that I know nothing about. And I went in, and the patient was laying on the bed, wearing a respiratory mask. And a conversation we had lasted about 30 minutes. And the person had an in-depth understanding of, let's call it Zen Buddhism, for a want of better words. But the patient I was speaking to was trying to resolve whether to fight and live or let go and die. And that's what our conversation was around. I could see there was a great sadness in them, that he hadn't pursued his path more diligently. And we spoke about this. And the reason, reflecting the reason I think there was sadness is because maybe he felt he could have resolved what he was trying to resolve earlier in his life, but he was doing it in the last days. The conversation was unusual, as at the end of it, it's really strange actually. I ended up knowing nothing about the patient at all. Normally you have some insight about their family or different stuff, but on this occasion I knew nothing about the patient, apart from a conversation that we'd spent for 30 minutes. And at the end of the conversation, I felt like this person had passed me a baton. It was almost like he'd given me something. I didn't know what or why, but I came away feeling I needed to do something. And it's probably partly why I'm here today talking, because it was shortly after that Roshi probably emailed and said, can you do a talk for such and such? And I felt like I needed to, I don't know, transmit something more. So it was quite profound. I left the chap sitting cross-legged on his bed with his oxygen mask had taken off, almost guru-like, as I walked away. And over Christmas, I came away, I had Christmas to spend, and I followed up on some of the things we'd spoken about, looked into some of the things, and I was really looking forward to going back and seeing him and thanking him for the stuff he'd pointed me, because I came away from the conversation with sort of almost great clarity about things. So I wanted to say thank you to him. And then we went back on a week later to work, and the first thing I was told when I went into the chaplaincy office is that he'd passed away. and he'd passed away, but I hadn't been duty, but he tried to contact me on the night that he'd passed. So he had something to tell me, and I didn't get to hear. But putting that aside, over the Christmas, I came back to reflect on a talk that I'd given last year around Bodhidharma. And because the Zen Buddhism I talk of that this patient was talking about was definitely, he spoke of it in terms of non-religious, and he spoke of it in terms of non-authority. This was some of the clarity that he gave me around what he was telling me. And when I was giving the talk last year around Bodhidharma, I had a realization during that talk that Bodhidharma himself seemed to keep away from authority. And I came up with a conclusion that he'd probably been sent to India himself. At the time when he went to India, there was nearly 2 million Buddhist monks. And in some what might be considered very religious orders. And Bodhidharma turned up. The first thing he gets called to is Emperor Wu's palace. And he was asked by Wu what merit there was to Wu through him building so many Buddhist temples across southern China. And Bodhidharma's response, which is pretty outrageous really, was vast emptiness, nothing holy. There is no merit. Yeah, quite courageous for somebody that's just been invited somewhere and is telling the person the answer to the question that he doesn't want to hear. So I had this feeling from this talk about Bodhidharma, and then I'm hearing it from this person in intensive care unit. And the Christmas time in England and probably North America is the same. We have dark days here. I had a very quiet Christmas, nobody around, so I had plenty of time for reflection, some good walks out in the countryside here, and some long evenings in the dark evenings sitting by the fire. And that reflection around this whole meeting, this profound meeting, and this sort of Bodhidharma thing going on, brought me back to what I might call about my early training in Spring Green. When I first turned up at Spring Green Roshi used to regularly make it clear that we did nothing for religious reasons. Everything we practiced was for a physical reason, a shift in the body and senses. And Green Roshi would regularly refer to the dojo at that time, and he may still do, but I've not heard it so much recently, as a laboratory. And for a long time, I can say I struggled with both of these concepts. One of it, I didn't really know what he meant by the lab. And secondly, the religious element, I come from a strong Christian tradition, which I followed into my 30s. And there is something about the bells and whistles and robes that brought some comfort. And I wasn't sure about this non-religious element. Yeah. But it wasn't until one seishin, very early on, it would have been at October, beginner's seishin, I think, when on a Saturday morning, Honda Roshi strolled into the dojo. We were all beginners, and we'd been sitting zazen, and he came in, and he started saying how often in his life his wife makes him annoyed, and the times he feels like he could kill her, but he hadn't. And that we needed to look deeply into what we're capable of and face into it. Now, for me, I can remember sitting there now thinking to myself, there's no way that I could kill someone. I remember it very well. It was like, I couldn't do that. What's he talking about? I don't have that feeling in me. But for some reason, I don't really know why, I went away and I would sit zazen. And I got into this habit of sitting zazen. And it was though that I had this big flashlight inside me going around looking and opening cupboard doors. of these areas in me that I didn't know what was behind them. And eventually I come across a cupboard door after several months, which I opened, and I knew that I had it in me to kill someone. Had no doubt. And as soon as that realization arrived with me, the fear I had of committing that act completely dissipated. It went away. Yeah, it lost its power. And it was gone. Now, the word power is interesting to me because now I'm going to move back into the non-authority of Bodhidharma. So for me, anti-authority is both external, which Bodhidharma didn't like and seems to have kept away from in his life. And I mentioned in my Bodhidharma talk that also Jesus Christ avoided authority. Yeah. So, but that authority is also internal. The internal, if we go inward, there's an authority that holds power over us. And that's what's interesting. And I had this power of this ability in me that created a fear. But like Honda Roshi said, I don't do it. Yeah. So it would seem, from Bodhidharma's perspective, he could see how religion plays an extraordinary role in narrowing the investigation that we need to take. Yeah. He could see that. And it's why he paid little heed to Emperor Wu's magnificent investment in the bells and whistles across China. Yeah. And became a wandering teacher. Bodhidharma went on to say, actually, and we don't quite know whether he actually said these things, but I suppose that's like the Bible also, and many of the sutras, but we take it that they were said. If you want to use your mind to study reality, you won't understand either your mind or reality. If you study reality without using your mind, you'll understand both. If you study reality without using your mind, you'll understand both. And I want to just hold that for the next half an hour or so, because I'm going to explore it with people that are close to the end of their lives, where they're not looking for knowledge, and what they become interested in is reality. When you haven't got long to live, reality comes into focus. Most of us have heard the story of the wise Zen master and the tea ceremony. And those of you who haven't, I'll just quickly run through it. But people from afar and near would ask to seek the counsel of this wise Zen master. Many would come and ask him to teach, enlighten them in the way of Zen. He seldom turned any away. One day, an important man, a man of authority, who used to command and obedience, came to visit the master. I have come today to ask you to teach me about Zen, open my mind to enlightenment. The tone of the important man's voice was one used to getting his own way. Yeah. The Zen master smiled and said that they should discuss the matter over a cup of tea. When the tea was served, the master poured his visitor a cup. He poured, and the tea rose to the rim and began to spill over the table and finally onto the robes of the wealthy man. Finally, the visitor shouted, "Enough! You're spilling the tea all over. Can't you see the cup is full?" The master stopped pouring and smiled at his guest. "You are like this teacup, so full that nothing more can be added. Come back to me when the cup is empty. Come back to me with an empty mind." We live in a society that takes every opportunity of filling up our cups. We're constantly marketed at. We're constantly filled up with more knowledge from podcasts or even me talking to you today. It's topping up your cup. Theories come out to us left, right, and centre. And we're given more and more ideas about how we should live life or not. And what we actually need is freedom from the known. Experience and knowledge becomes a handicap. If we go back to why we're here today, particularly, Paul was pretty articulate about it. It's not to listen to me. I would say, if so, why aren't you listening to me? Why are you running your own commentary whilst I'm talking? Why are you deciding whether you're agreeing with me or disagreeing with me? Yeah? How many people here are really and truly listening? What we've actually come here today to do is to reaffirm our own identification. Your role and the formation of the self. That's what we're doing. If we can move across to listening 100%, we can manage not to do those things. But if we're just reaffirming who we are through beliefs and judgments through what I'm saying, then we're not. Yet to have insight, we have to look freshly. We have to empty the cup and we have to examine our current experience directly. We have to examine our current experience directly. We are back in the laboratory that Green Roshi kept pointing out to me. Looking at ourselves in relationships to others and stuff around us in the world. Looking at what confronts us in our daily lives. Now that can be either a tedious exercise or a joyful, depending on how we want to frame it in our minds. But the laboratory that we're working in runs 24/7. And it takes a great deal of patience, which most of us don't have time for. Because if we're out there chasing our worldly desires and ideas, and when you're chasing something, there's always something else to move on to. Like we pluck the next theory or next idea to solve our problems, so we can quickly move on to the next thing because we haven't got time to sort the last thing or fully resolve the last thing. Then we haven't really had time to notice on our internal reality. I love this Bodhidharma quote, which he said, "A Buddha is an idle person. They don't run around after fortune or fame." A Buddha is an idle person. They don't run around after fortune or fame. It's probably not surprising that someone would say that who managed to sit in a cave for 9 years. Yeah? But that quote, it may well have already kicked off some conflict in you. What sort of questions is it throwing up for you inside? What's going on for you around that? A Buddha is an idle person. What are all your prejudices and judgments saying to you about that statement? How can a Buddha be an idle person? And the way I see it is, you can't be a Buddha if you're chasing and grasping. It's completely impossible. The trouble is, the trouble we face is that we try to use the same techniques and patterns that we are taught to use in the external world to also use going inwardly. And you can't. The technique of going inward is not the same we would use of grasping stuff in the world. Everything you've been taught about success and knowledge doesn't work going inwardly. It's a different set of rules. In fact, going inwardly, there are no rules. The trouble is, we lack inward vision, and instead we seek outward power with all its knowledge and what the world considers success. When I talk about success, I always think of my father, who judges everybody on success. And I always flummox him with the question, after he's told me how many houses and cars people have, as to whether they're happy, which he never knows the answer to. Yeah. So, excuse me. So, I want to come back to my chaplaincy work over the past 12 months, because I've met and spoke at depth with a lot of people, as I said earlier, at the end of life. Some people have 6 months to live, some people have days to live. It's humbling and grounding work to be doing. What I found astonishing talking with people about their experiences, and it really does surprise me every time, is how wise they are. And this wisdom is regardless of age and education. And how quickly it seems to be possible to burn through what we would consider, I always consider the big three gates in Zen, yeah, which are, number one, mind-body, that we have to reconcile. Number two is the crippling delusion of self and other, yeah, and finally resolving the question of life and death. But people that are coming towards their end of life seem to be able to just burn through them to get to the wisdom. And maybe it's through, sometimes when I'm sitting and listening to people say such wise things, I feel like the ego must have the ability to instantaneously catch fire to itself and burn itself out, because it just goes. I would say it doesn't occur with everybody. Some people can go right into dying in the most fearful manner, but it seems to be a minority rather than a majority. I went through the end of life journey recently with a young person in their mid-20s. They were absolutely fearless, resolving the last gateless gate of life and death, and made a peaceful transformation. And it reminded me, I read a book a long time ago called The Three Pillars of Zen by Roshi Philip Kapleau. And he studied under a Japanese master who, in the book, I mean, they're true stories, he had a young female student who dies at a very young age. And he travels across Japan after she'd written him a letter to give Dharma transmission before she died, because she was fully awakened. And often when I'm talking to, particularly when I was talking to this young person, I felt like that. Green Roshi talks in his book Facing Suffering of this issue about coming through, and he talks about it in the terms of shugyo. But he talks about it coming later in life, this realization that we can have this enlightenment. So how can a person see so clearly, as I would say, through all the shit? Yet, here we are, all struggling. That's the question we must ask ourselves. This particular person, this young person, had no teacher, no knowledge of Buddhism or religion. I even remember saying to them, how do you know this stuff? And they said, I don't know. Yeah. Vast emptiness. We have to empty our cup to experience vast emptiness. And filling it perhaps brings us holiness. But we're looking for vast emptiness. That's the question that each of us have to confront. So where do we start with emptying our cup? It's a journey of self-inquiry. You can get the pun. It's a journey of self-inquiry. Yeah, that's what it's about. So I was thinking about an exercise here that we could do. And I suggest that after we finish here, you go away, because I'm going to do this. Well, I'm not going to do this, but I'm going to partly do it. But I'm going to pour myself a cup of tea. So I suggest afterwards you go away, get yourself a cup of tea or coffee, and you fill the cup completely to the brim. And in fact, you overflow some of it onto the saucer. And then feel into that cup, and that is you today. And we know you need some emptiness to experience freshness in your life, to let some ease and joy in. This is what we're trying to do. So you've got this overflowing cup of tea in front of us. Where is there any room for that little bit of ease and joy? Luckily enough, I had a little bit to see the red kite. There's a little bit of space for that. So when we come back to this knowledge that we have, I always think, and I say it to people around, let's start by getting rid of all the pettiness in life that we carry around. One thing I always find quite amusing is when I challenge people about the pettiness in their life, they can get quite defensive, believing that there is no pettiness in their life. Everything is important. When I talk about pettiness, I'm talking about things. Trying to think, I saw a patient this week who had much pettiness, seemed to have much pettiness in their life. And it would be things like, the nurse brought me my coffee and it was too strong. And it's really annoying. How many of those types of stuff have we got that's in that cup of tea or coffee that we're going to drink? Yeah. How much stuff are we holding on to that is just total pettiness? So if you're struggling with around having any pettiness in your life, I would suggest that you do the exercise and tell yourself before the exercise, you've got 48 hours to live. Yeah. 48 hours to live. How much of this cup am I going to get rid of and let some ease and joy in? Very funny thing recently that I found that brought me great humour. I'm a bit strange in that sense, but we had a student trying to select a Koan teacher. Not sure if they've selected a Koan teacher yet, but as you know, in Chosi Zen we have a number of Koan teachers, which is brilliant because it causes much confusion. Yeah, who am I going to pick? Yeah, so now they're starting their Koan training in complete confusion about not even knowing which teacher to pick. And what better starting point can you have for Koan training? Yeah. And that pettiness, that's the pettiness I'm talking about here. Yeah, that great confusion that it creates. And the great thing about that confusion is even when they've chosen the teacher, in 6 months' time, they'll be wondering whether they've picked the right teacher. Yeah. So you can see the stuff that we have to deal with that goes on for us. Yeah. Life is tricky. There's many things that want to keep ease and joy out of your life. Even selecting a Koan teacher. So actually, coming towards the end, and I want to read an email that Scoby Roshi sent out. Probably terrified now, Scoby Roshi, what I'm going to read out, but yeah, but it was a nice email, and it's about a teacher who was a teacher, a Japanese Zen master. His name's Sasiki Genzo Roshi, who died in 2019. Now, Sasiki Genzo Roshi met the Zen master Sogen Amori Roshi, I've got it written here, in 1967. So he met Mori Sogen Roshi in 1967 and became his student. 4 years later, he joined his teacher's Zen community as a layperson, and Sogen Amori Roshi confirmed him as a Zen master in 1983. That's what the email says. In 1991, Sasiki Genzo Roshi founded the first ruin Zendo in Europe in Munich. And he then came to Europe every year for several seishins. Now, the bit I'm going to read here is one of his last teishos that he gave. And it's quite, it's good. And it goes like this. So it says, Roshi is a great robber. This is an act of love. The Roshi robber takes the entire coat from St. Martin, including the trousers and underpants, and lets him go on completely naked, completely freed. If we invite the robber into our house, we open the door for him. Please, Roshi, take it. Take everything, without any residue. Then we too can go beyond. Then we too can go beyond where we are, look behind our previous view, change our perspective, suddenly liberated. Thank you, Roshi. Yes, thank you too. When you are completely open, all worlds are your eyes. Eye to eye, hand to hand, body to body, ki to ki, all worlds to all worlds. Universal, incredible symphony sounds. So, I suppose if I was going to take a bit of tea in my cup here, as a Roshi, we want to empty it all out. Yeah? That's what we're looking to do with students. Yeah? We want that. Yeah? White Law Roshi often has a bell that she stuffs socks into because it won't ding. Yeah? You need to get the socks out. Vast emptiness, as Bodhidharma calls it. Yeah. Stop filling the cup up. Never come back to me and listen to me again. Yeah? Don't waste your time. Just go inward. You have all the answers. I speak to people daily who've never seen a Roshi, and they know the answers. Yeah? I'm going to finish by saying the wise wield no authority, and those in authority are not wise. In my last 12 months of chaplaincy work, this seems just so true to me. Transformation can only take place within you, and it's your responsibility. So, would anybody like to ask any questions? I would agree. But that becomes the ground. My own view is that within that space that you're talking about is our biggest fear, which is loneliness. Nothing but us. And the fear of that. And you have to come face to face with that. But once you come face to face with it, like all things, they dissipate. But what happens is by filling up the cup, we block it. We block facing it. It's just so easy in this world to block out coming face to face. Keep going. That's what I would say, Paul. Back to the laboratory. Any other comments or questions? Agree with both of the comments around it feels so daunting to empty, and we've spent most of our lives filling and filling all, yeah, very common. It's a human condition to chase and fill up. And it was clearly the human condition back, was it nearly 2,000 years ago when Bodhidharma was around, or 1,500 years ago. The wise teacher sent him to China. So maybe that's why we have to do it a little bit slowly. I mean, you're clearly going to speed up if you know you've only got 48 hours. So maybe not knowing when we might die doesn't help. And you can see why it gets spoken about in Zen of being the death of the ego is the death in itself. Once you have the death of the ego, you're in a very different place. Passing of the body is just something on the peripheral. Yeah. So I see a lot of dementia patients, and all the patients I've talked about are completely cognate. Yeah. So, and in some ways it's interesting. I don't know this, and it's just a bit of experience around dementia. What I do sort of find, well, I have found with dementia is that people are very different, and I often wonder why. What comes up for people when they have dementia is very different, and I often wonder if they've resolved things prior to the dementia, whether the dementia would be different. Because they can only, I'm making it, these are non-medical assumptions, that they can only bring up what they know. So if they bring up anger, for instance, in their dementia, and some people get violent in dementia, is that something that's been suppressed in them and hasn't been resolved at any point in their life? And now it's trying to be free. Whereas some people are very peaceful in their dementia. So are those people, have they resolved what they've needed to and found the peace? So, but if you're fearful, you have a lot of fear and you suddenly have dementia, how does that work itself out? So for me, Zen training gets us into a position to move into, whether it's dementia or death, in a different manner. Yeah. We've done the work before we get there. I often find myself, and I do really find myself arriving at the bedside of people that don't have very long, and I know that I have no opportunity to give them any skills in the short time they have to help themselves. Knowing that if you'd met them 5 years before, how through breath and posture and stuff, they would be seeing things very different. Rather than being tied up in their self and in the worry of death heading their way, they could be living out the reality of where they are today for another month or whatever, living in a very different way. I do occasionally see it, and I would say it's not just Zen, but Christianity does have that ability, and I often come across Christians at the end of life that have had proper, deep practices, I would say, through their faith. And I saw a couple recently whose wife had recently been diagnosed with a case, and the husband had been in hospital the day before, and he told me it was one of the most, can't remember the words, something like one of the most vibrant days they'd ever had together the day before. Yeah. So their own faith brought them that peace. But they always seem to be people that, when I talk to them, if I do talk to them, that seem to have some, what I would call, physical practice. Yeah. So I don't really think that we often think that we have an authority over us. So, for instance, what's the authority that's causing the confusion around Koan teachers? What is that authority? Who's making that? Who's causing that confusion? Who wants the best for me? You know, that's the authority that I'm referring to, and it can be seen as an authority. It's in charge. Who's this thing? What's this thing in charge? Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. We can see authority outside of us. It's very, very easy, and we can see how we hand over to authority outside of us as well. We can see how we want. You know, I mean, Paul sort of mentioned it today. He came and is very honest. I appreciate the honesty around it. He came today in hoping that I'm going to give him something, you know, to make his journey easier. Yeah, that's what we. So I hand over to you, and you sort my life out for me, and it'll be ease and joy. Yeah, that's what we hope. I'm happy to give you the authority to sort all this out for me. Yeah. And that's the problem of society we have generally. If you look at society, why we have so many wars in the world. Yeah. And there's authority in religion, and I think that's why Bodhidharma kept away from it. Yeah. You know, and authority in religion is not any better than authority in politics. It's authority. It's people giving over, which takes it off in the wrong direction. I think it was the Buddha that said something like, you know, you need to experience what you're being told. Don't believe anybody. Yeah, discover it for yourself. Experience it. If a teacher's telling you something, go away, seek it out, search it out, experience it. And if it's useful, keep it. And if not, don't. So We must be nearly at the top of the hour, are we, as you say in the US? Yeah. Thank you for turning up. Don't ever come back again.